Okay, today we're going to be reviewing, as you know, in the last 4 classes we've gone over the various theories of interpersonal communication, and in preparation for Exam 2 we're going to go back and do a quick look at those topics that have been covered. You'll recall that in interpersonal communication we're talking about 2 people, sometimes 3, who are face-to-face exchanging messages. They recognize that they're interdependent, they're interlocked, and people use and break rules. And just in our last tape, Dr. Williamson was with us and spent a great deal of time going over how rules theory works, Shimonov's theory in particular, and Pearson-Cronin's coordinated management of meaning. We'll spend less time on that since you just heard it in the last tape. Okay, people affect each other's outcomes through interpersonal communication. The premise behind persuasion is that communication can result in change, and often that persuasion takes place on an interpersonal level through compliance gaining strategies. Okay, we also reduce our uncertainty through these exchanges, and we've talked a great deal this semester about uncertainty theory and how people seek information to reduce uncertainty, how they also use that information to create uncertainty sometimes. But most of the time we're trying to reduce it. We've talked about how exchanges have cost and rewards. It costs us all something to be here in class right now. We could be sleeping in. We could be having a nice breakfast out. You know, there are other fun things besides lecturing and taking notes. But here we are because we believe that there's a reward to this. You'd like to graduate. I'd like to get these things on tape so I don't keep repeating myself every semester, and so on. But anyway, every communication exchange has cost and rewards to it. Self-disclosure is extremely important in all of this. This is information that we reveal to people that they wouldn't otherwise know. It's reciprocal, it's incremental. The depth of the self-disclosure is measured by both the quantity of topics that we discuss as well as the depth in those topics. But it involves risk. We have to trust people in order to tell our innermost secrets, reveal our true selves to them, and so forth. Good self-disclosure is incremental. It's reciprocal, and that means both people do it. It's not just one person dumping their dirty laundry or the skeletons from their closet, whatever metaphor you want, on other people. You take turns and you start with that safe information like demographic data and work your way up to heavier, more in-depth topics. But it's with your best friends, your closest or most intimate acquaintances, that you share the greatest number of topics and that you have greater depth in those topics that you share. Okay, social learning theory, Bandera, you'll recall him. He said that people are capable of self-regulation through self-rewards and punishments. And just think about the things that you do for yourself. If you've been really, if I've been really good and jumped X number of hurdles and through the hoops and whatever, I may reward myself with a trip to the mall. If I've been bad, I may tell myself, I can't watch any TV all weekend. I have to work on that computer and get things done and get exams ready, or whatever it is that I need to do. But we all do things that reinforce and either positive or negatively reinforce our behavior, and through that we engage in what's called social learning, and we may alter those behaviors that we engage in. Okay, come on, slide. Okay, he gave us 4 stages, and you can review those in your book. They're discussed in depth on the previous tape. Uncertainty reduction theory was Berger and Calabrese. That's that same information theory that we've been talking about before. And it's a very powerful theory. It's one that operates across a variety of contexts. And it's the same theory. It's just translated from the broad level down to the more specific and interpersonal level. And as I mentioned before, people can use the information to either establish certainty by gaining information or use it to create uncertainty. Okay, Berger and Calabrese gave us 3 stages. These are similar to the stages of Knapp that we'll see and review shortly. The entry phase, the personal phase, the entry phase being that basic demographic data, etc. Personal phase, more intimate disclosure, and then the exit phase, which is the 3rd phase. He divides it into 3 basic parts, whereas Duck is going to give us 4 or 5, depending on how you look at it. The exit phase occurring when the relationship is terminated, and often this involves what's called leave-taking behaviors. When you hear someone say something to you like, "Well, thanks for stopping by," or "Okay, well, I'll look forward to hearing from you in the future." Those kinds of little phrasings are things that say, "I'm really done talking to you right now. It's time to get off the phone," or "I'll get back to you later on that." Those kinds of phrases are cues to the other person that you're really done with this sequence of communication exchanges. And we use that knowledge in order to guide our behavior. Okay, and we develop what Berger has called a communication plan. And probably you're most aware of your communication plans when you go on a job interview. Most of you dress up really sharp. You look better than anything maybe than your wedding day. But, you dress differently. You have a plan. You have questions you're going to ask. You've got answers ready for things that that you anticipate and so forth. But other times you have a lesser plan, whether it's a proposal of marriage, whether it's going in to see a professor about a grade. All of these things involve communication plans. And some are longer, broader plans. Others are more short range, more specific in nature. But they all involve this planning process, and Green takes this a step further with what he calls action assembly theory, and says that it involves memory, it involves retrieval, the ability to use what you have stored in your memory. You think about the times that you've seen other people communicate well. And you say, well, that was just the right thing to say in that situation, and you try to make a mental note that whether it's a good exchange of repartee or whether it's a leave-taking behavior, there are all kinds of categories of behaviors. But we file those and messages related to those behaviors. So we file those things in our memory banks, but we need to be able to retrieve them in order to use them. Sometimes we use scripts, sometimes we have novel utterances, and we've talked about behaviorism versus Chomsky and deep structure grammar and those things about how we have novel utterances that we're capable of engaging in, as well as things that we've learned along the way. But according to action assembly theory, you'll recall, we're interested in action outcome units, how we use content and protocols together in order to achieve particular outcomes. And the frequency of the use of those contributes to our ability to retrieve that information and use it in a meaningful way. Okay, social identity theory is one of the simplest, shortest little theories that you have in your workbook. It's really just this one-liner, but it's very important. People see themselves as members of groups, and they see other people as members of groups. So you may see yourself as a musician, as an athlete, as a scholar, as a Texan, as a member of a fraternity or sorority. There are just all kinds of groups out there. And we'll come back to groups more when we actually get to that unit. But it's important to recognize that people see themselves as members of groups, and they identify with that, and they identify other people as members of groups. Okay, Street and Giles have what's called speech accommodation theory, and they're interested in how people develop their schemata. It ties back into this communication plan idea again, but it's also linking to the idea that we have a scheme in the way that we see things. This will tie in shortly to Delia and constructivism, that we have this view of the world. And we use our cognitive processes and these schemata to accommodate one another. Some of what we do is scripted, like our ritualistic greetings. Hi, how are you? Fine, how are you? Everything going okay? Yep, see you later. Okay, bye. You know, and some of those things we do on remote control almost. But we're also interested in impression management. And this theory is explanatory of the ways that we manage our impression. We accommodate one another. You may clean up your mouth. You may get more jargony. You do different things to accommodate the people that you're around, so that you may talk differently to your peers from the way you talk to your grandparents and so on, or your minister versus your best friend. And much of the accommodation is done through nonverbal cues. You may find yourself, if the other person's talking really fast, you may find yourself talking fast in return, or if it's a real laid-back conversation, you just, and sometimes the other person's accent even rubs off on you, particularly if you stay a week in a different part of the country. You may find that subconsciously you're accommodating the other person and picking up a bit of a drawl or a bit of a Chicago A or whatever it might be. Go to Boston and lose all your R's. So anyway, kind of a fun theory to look at. But this mirroring is the other term for speech convergence theory. Speech convergence phenomenon is the big long way of saying it. Mirroring behavior is a shorter way of identifying that. But it all refers to how we develop a repertoire and how we mimic the behavior of the people that we're around and how they mimic us. And all of this works together to maintain a kind of social distance within the group. We'll get this slide up. The social distance is achieved through the maintenance. You know, there's some people you can call by your first name, others you'll call by title forever. My thesis advisor, I called Professor Thompson until the day he passed away. You know, I was never comfortable calling him by first name. There are other professors, not very many, I'm in a different generation, but there are others that, you know, first names were comfortable. And so anyway, but there's a social distance that's maintained there. Whether you call me by title and last name, or whether you call me by first name, establishes a social distance. And you're not supposed to use first name unless you've been given a dispensation to do so. That's part of the little social rules that we have in this country. So anyway, that's an interesting theory. Okay, discrepancy arousal theory we considered next, and that's the work of Capello and Green, and then later on Judy Burgoon got into the act. But this theory points out that people have positive and negative, we'll go ahead here. We have expectations about things, and when things don't turn out the way that we want them to, then there's an arousal that occurs. And sometimes it's positive, and sometimes it's negative. Okay? If somebody you like walks and you say, "Good morning, how are you?" and she just walks past me like I'm a column in the room, that's going to be a negative arousal. You know, what's going on here? You know, we always speak to each other. Today we didn't. And depending on what I know, I may say, well, you know, she daydreams a lot. She didn't even hear me. I may excuse it. But still, and if it were to repeat itself, then it would become a consistent negative arousal kind of thing. Sometimes positive arousal occurs. You know, somebody you don't even know. Ever had anybody on the elevator compliment what you're wearing or just say something nice to you, and part of your brain is going, why is this person talking to me? I don't know this person, you know. But they said something nice, so I liked it, and that was a positive arousal. And you might even remember the face and notice the person if you encounter them on the sidewalk or in the elevator again. Okay, this all ties back into our cognitive templates, our interpretive schema, and fits into the domain of what Delia has called constructivism, how we interpret our view of the world. We make sense of our world by the cognitive templates that we put on it. You know, this is the way I see the university. I see the structure in a particular way. This is the way my family template works, and I'll spare you the details. You know, but when you think of family, you've got some sort of schemata, some sort of cognitive template. That's a good word. Same way you have templates on your computers for your resume, for a job application letter. You know, it's a framework that you fit things into so that they make sense. And we do that in all sorts of domains: the workplace, the family, your social life, your neighborhood. You can pick and choose as you wish. Okay, and we won't bog down in it today because we went over it before, but Delia developed, and this is a little probe about how you see things, and that's in your workbook if you haven't thought through that already. Delia developed what he called the Role Category Questionnaire, the RCQ, the Role Category Questionnaire, which is a tool for measuring how people actually classify things. And we talked in the previous lecture more about this. But he's interested in differentiation, abstraction, integration, and how those descriptive categories work together. And if you actually take the questionnaire, then you can, you know, do another one of those self-assessment tools that will help you determine to what extent you are a differentiating style, to what extent you tend to be more in the abstraction category, and integration, how much you're able to recognize and reconcile impressions that may be in conflict with one another. For example, if you have a friend who's sometimes late but sometimes very punctual, sometimes very extroverted and talkative but other times very quiet, what does all that mean? Yeah. And this would also tie back into what Dr. Williamson was talking with you yesterday with the Myers-Briggs questionnaire. Are you an extrovert or an introvert or a blend of those two? Are you judging or sensing, perceiving, intuitive, or some kind of combination of those? So all of this fits together in helping us understand who people are and how they are able to develop their communication plans. Now, O'Keefe and McCormick label their little theory, and it's kind of a first cousin to these others, as message design logic. And they're looking at how people develop their communication plans so that they perform competently, whether it's in an interpersonal context, an organizational context, or a mass-mediated context. But the idea of competency acts is very important. And they break those, as you'll recall, into three categories: expressive, conventional, and rhetorical. And the expressive messages, remember, are like emotional dumps. If you had a harrowing experience on the freeway, you had a terrible time getting where you're supposed to be, sometimes you just need to come in and talk about it and ventilate about it and get it off your mind. Other messages are more conventional, the rules. We follow the rules and take turns in conversation, some of the things we were talking about last tape. The rhetorical messages are the ones like when you're putting a speech together, when you're actually creating a message with a particular intent. We would call these lectures rhetorical messages. Or if you're making a persuasive speech before the city council, or your civic club, or the board of directors. These are messages that have been consciously created. You've used logic and other logic and emotion and credibility, all sorts of appeals, remember Aristotle, to create a message that will generate and provide for a particular outcome. So expressive, conventional, rhetorical are the three types of the categories. And no one is better than the others. You have to pick according to the context that you're in, okay, and use what works in that particular situation. And different logics may work in different places. Some people may be more responsive to a Mr. Spock type logical appeal. Other people will be more responsive to an emotional appeal. Others are more influenced by a high credibility appeal. I can remember in high school debate days, we used to round up our little quotations on cards and go off to tournaments, and I thought if I had a quotation from the President of the United States, and we have foreign policy comes to mind, if the president, I won't tell you who the president was back then, but if the president said this is how our foreign policy should be, ooh, that was a really good piece of evidence. It's probably of more credibility then than it has been in recent years, but the point is it depends on who your audience is as to which message design logic is going to work the best. Okay, the cognitive process is strongly affected by what's been labeled cognitive complexity, and this has to do with your ability to process and recall these various things, construct these different plans. But cognitive complexity is more than a personality trait. It's a process and involves all these things that we've been talking about in terms of the ability to use scripts, to retrieve information, to use the information that's stored in the brain. And the more cognitive complexity you have, then the better you're able to separate issues, select goals, achieve outcomes. Okay, then very quickly we'll just recap on the stages of relational development. There's some other PowerPoint slide presentations that we have online that look at NAP stages of attraction and duck stages of dissolution. Remember Jack and Jill who get married and they have children, and then their marriage falls into disarray, and unfortunately by the time the slideshow is over with, they're divorced. Well, it all began with initiation, when you first make contact, meet a new person. There's that kind of like entry. It's like the entry phase we were talking about a minute ago. The exchange of demographic information. Then there's an experimentation phase where dating may take place, or the boss hires the person as a temporary worker for a while to see how it's going to work out. If things go well, there will be an intensification that occurs. That'll move on into, hopefully, if this is going to be a working relationship, a permanent relationship, it'll move from intensification. You're not just going out on one date every 2 weeks, you're going out every night of the week. It moves on into an integration stage where you're sharing ideas, the higher levels of self-disclosure, as we reviewed earlier today, through integration to ultimately the bonding phase. And at bonding, the couple may get married. The individual may be tenured at the university, if this is a workplace kind of thing. The lawyer may become a partner in the law firm. So this may be, this is interpersonal, but it can be work-related or it can be romantic. It doesn't matter what context it is when it's a bonding kind of relationship. Okay. When a relationship, and in a little while we'll look at strategies for disengaging there on the next slideshow. But as a final slide in this show, the stages of relational dissolution developed by Stephen Duck up at Iowa are intrapsychic. That's where that little voice goes off in your head that says, what am I doing here? Why did I marry this person? Why did I take this job? Why did I take a class at this hour? Why did I take so many classes in summer 1 or spring or whatever? You know, it's the voice in your head that says, I think I made a mistake. I may need to reevaluate what's going on here. The dyadic phase moves from you to one other person. You may, if this is your significant other you're having trouble with, you may talk to that person, or you may go to your best friend and say, I don't know if this marriage is going to work or not. Or I don't know if this job is going to work. I'm having some second thoughts about things. Two-person, dyadic. Social, it moves beyond two people. You may be kind of putting your family or your workplace on notice. Okay, you start to let out little clues to mom and dad and siblings that this marriage may be in trouble, or to your co-workers that you're not really happy and you're thinking about, or you've already started to look for other jobs and you're seriously considering quitting. The final phase is the grave dressing phase. I think this is a great title. Just as there are markers out in the cemetery for people who are deceased, the grave dressing is the public story that we tell to whomever we tell it to for why the relationship died. And you'll know people who get divorced, and you know, sometimes they tell really nasty stories on each other. Well, that blankety blank, let me tell you what he did. And well, you know, she was always doing this and so and running around and never doing this and was doing that. And, you know, nobody would put up with that. Anybody would say they'd had enough, whatever. Other times people will just say, oh, you know, we just kind of grew apart over the years and decided we'd be happier going our separate ways. Was that true or not? Unless you know the people really well, you don't know. You know, but that's the story. That may be the story that they tell. You know, why'd you drop all your classes last spring? Well, what story are you going to tell? And will it be the whole truth? We get to deception later on. You know, but will it be the whole truth, a partial truth, a cover-up? Sometimes it's none of the other person's business. And so you have a slick kind of cover story that you get into that just provides minimal information to them so that, you know, they only get the information they're entitled to. And you're not obliged to give them all the information that they want. Okay. We're going to move next, as soon as I get on the right page here, into, well, just in your book, the next section of interpersonal communication theories. As soon as we get past the header here. Okay, we're going to look and review the relational disengagement strategies. Leslie Baxter's the one that put these together. But have you ever thought about, I know you've all been in relationships, you've gotten out of them. What did you do to get out of those relationships? Well, sometimes you just withdraw. You go out on a date a time or two with somebody and go, no, this is not good, I'm not interested, and you're just not available anymore. You're too busy. Okay, Pseudo De-Escalation is a fancy way of saying a false slowing down. Sometimes you get that little comment about, oh, you know, I think it'd be good if we dated other people, put a little space in our relationship. I know we're engaged, but, you know, maybe we need to date around and be sure that we really love each other. Now, this is called pseudo, false de-escalation, slowing down. Why? Because you know on the front end that you're getting ready to dump the other person. And we'll come to one, I think, on the next slide called fait accompli, where it's done, it's over with. Well, that's kind of rude if you've been engaged for a couple of years, let them down easy, I guess. I'm not sure there's a good way here. Okay, cost escalation. This is a great one. You run the cost. Remember we talked about social exchange theory and cost and rewards. Cost escalation, you run the cost up so high the other person can't stand it. Now, it may be that, with your girlfriend, it was enough just taking her out for a hamburger on Friday nights. But now, she wants a first-class restaurant at least twice a week. She wants flowers. She wants candy. She wants jewelry. He wants sex, right? I don't know. Maybe she wants sex. I don't know. But anyway, the cost runs up, and it may get too expensive. It may not, as long as you both agree that the reward is worth the cost. But anyway, cost escalation is where remember we're in the disengagement strategies category, that's where that you're running the cost up so high that the other person's going to bail on you. Now, it's not always just money or sex. It may be time. You want their time every night of the week. And going out twice a week is not enough. So you become really time possessive about that. Sometimes it's an emotional, we're still on cost escalation, but sometimes it's an emotional cost. You scream, you rant and rave, you have hissy fits, you whine, you just do obnoxious things that are emotionally draining, and the other person says it's not worth it. I just can't stand any more of this. Okay, fading away is like withdrawal, only both people do it. Now notice also that this list is strategies, not stages. When we have things like nap and duck that are stages, you have to keep them in order and you need them all there. But strategies, you can't even use all of these. Unless this couple makes up and breaks up and makes up and breaks up over 4 or 5 years, you can't do all of these things. Either you withdraw or you fade away, or you might, 2 or 3 of these might work. But if you've written in your paper that you went through all of these stages, because it doesn't work that way. You can't do all of these things at the same time. Okay, the state of the relationship talk is sometimes it's the boss calling the employee in, saying, I think we need to talk. Sometimes it's the engaged couple. One is saying to the other, okay, we've been engaged for 7 years now. Are we getting married or not? Whatever it is that's a state of the relationship evaluation and discussion. Attributional conflict. Attributional conflict. You pick a fight and blame it on the other person. You would never do a thing like that, would you? Okay, but attribute, remember you assign the cause, conflict. So that may take the form of, I think we did this last class, where do you want to go for dinner? I don't care. Where do you want to go? Doesn't matter to me. Where do you want to go? And you banter that back and forth for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, until one person picks the spot and then the other one goes, God, I can't believe you picked this spot. You drive the car into parking lot X and, why are we stopping here? I hate this kind of food. You idiot. How many times have I told you I can't stand this? Well, you said you didn't care where we ate. Yes, but if you'd known what was going on, you'd know. And that gets to mind reading, and we'll come to that in a minute. But anyway, attributional conflict. You pick a fight and make it look like it's the other person's fault. You do that very often, the relationship's not going to last. Negotiated farewell is the healthiest of the group. That's where, if you're getting a divorce or the person is terminating employment, you sit down and talk about it. I get the car, you get the boat. I get the cats, you get the dog. The kids, we flip. I don't know. But how are you going to work this stuff out? Who gets the stereo? Who gets the TV? Who gets this? Who gets that? And whether it's stuff or it's usually stuff. But it may involve visitation rights. I don't know, just whatever it is you have to evaluate and work out. The negotiated farewell is the healthy way to do it. Okay, the last one is fait accompli, and that simply translates from the Latin to make it accomplished, or it is done. Think of Picard on new Star Trek, make it so. Well, fait accompli. It is done. It is so. And that's where, in the workplace, you get the pink slip, you're fired. It's over. It's not negotiable. There's nothing to talk about. It's done. Or the person walks in with the divorce papers, and says, file for divorce today. Here. It's your copy. Okay. Not a pleasant way to go generally. Okay. Then we've talked before about compliance gaining strategies, so we're just going to hit those lightly today. These are the things that we do to get other people to do what we want them to do. It's also what other people do in order to get us to do what they want us to do. How does your physician get you to take all of your medicine? How does the physician get you to eat healthier, exercise, whatever they're trying to accomplish? And think about how you use these different strategies, promises, threats, expertise, liking, debt, moral appeals. Got some more of them here. Pre-giving, you give stuff in advance so the people will owe you later. Aversive stimuli, positive, negative self-feelings. You'll feel so good if you do this, or you're going to feel really rotten if you do that. Alter casting throws the person into another role. Only a really nice person would do thus and so. Only a really bad person, evil person, wicked person, lazy person, pick your label, would do that sort of thing. So anyway, you have a whole assortment there that you can choose from, that you do choose from, that people choose as they attempt to get you to do things as well. But notice in your own frame of reference how these things change from one context to another. And so we're going to look at them again briefly, resorted according to the types of power. And there's some people who have power over you that can manipulate your consequences. They can make promises, threats, warnings, and they have some clout. If your little sister threatens you, unless she's a biter or a hair puller or something, she probably doesn't have much real clout. You go, yeah, right, and you just dismiss it and go on. But some parents have real power, some have none. Watch parents in the grocery store. Some are in good control. Others, their kids are manipulated. I won't go there today. But anyway, bosses, parents, there's some people who have that kind of power. There's another category of power, though, that's called identification power. And this has to do with our relational position to the other person. People that we like and that we want to like us, that we relate to for whatever reason, we have a different level of power. I would say Dr. Williamson and I fall into the identification category. We do things for each other because we like one another. I don't know that we engage in flattery particularly, but we engage in compliments, probably just giving each other warm fuzzies. We'll come to those. But anyway, we do things because we identify professionally and to some extent just as career women who've known each other a long time. Okay, there's a third category, though, and this has to do with the people who have the power to define our values, to create obligations for us, and I would say that Williamson and I are not at that level. She doesn't put me on guilt trips. We don't try to define for each other right and wrong, what's sin or not sin at that level. But there may be people in your life who have that significant other kind of power. Ministers, some family members, often it's a grandfather or grandmother who has more of that than your own parents do. There's something about skipping a generation there. I can't explain it. But anyway, three types of power that affect the type of compliance gaining strategies that we're likely to use. Okay, we've talked from probably day one in here about attribution theory. We use that as a sample theory early on. It's very simple. People perceived behavior as being caused, and the cause is either in the perceiver or in the environment. Okay, and this, while it's a short, simple theory, it's a powerful theory because it really does predict what people do. People assign causes systematically. Why was the person late? Well, here are my possible options for behavior. Why did the student make an A on the exam? That one's easier to answer. Why did the student make an F on the exam? Well, there are possible lists of causes there. The cause that we assign impacts the perceiver's feelings as well as behavior. If you think the person was lazy, if you think the person was out to get you, some negative motive in that, you're going to have a very different feeling than, let's say if somebody puts a cigarette burn on your new sofa. Do you believe that it was an accident, or do you think they were just being stupid? Do you think they did it on purpose? Well, how you perceive that will very much influence the way that you respond in the situation. And one cause will be discounted if others are possible. Okay, there are mediation factors. Oh, we slipped over to Fleck here. Okay, functions of families is a list that we get from Stephen Fleck. Mediation is one of the things that families should do. And we just kind of pause to look at this because so many of you will write your papers centered around some dimension of your family or someone else's family. Your family, for most of us, is very important. We're very close to our families. I find a few loners along the way. But there will be many applications that we've already made and will continue to make in here about how communication works within the family. Certainly mediation is a primary communication function within the family. Families also engage in marital functions. It's where partners seek gratification and they share leadership tasks, and that involves communication as well. Nurturing functions, there's communication involved in the caring of children, in the socialization of our children. If you've ever known any children that weren't very well socialized, need a little more communication there, both positive and negative or aversive stimuli, perhaps. Okay, sensory stimulation comes through the touching, nurturing behavior. Relational functions. The members of the family have to relate to one another. Dr. Williamson spoke in the last lecture about how her family is different from some others, that they're much more integrated and interdependent, and how they trip over each other and so forth. My family was more one that was separated. Each girl had their own bed. Well, two shared a bedroom, but they had their own closets and their own beds and their own space in that room. And while we were integrated in many ways as a family, we were also separate and apart. Anyway, enough of that. The families are very important to us. The communication function is a very important dimension of that because the messages they're affected by the linguistic customs of the community that we're in, whether it involves respect for the elderly or just how we relate to one another. The emancipation function, think about how much communication is involved between the family and the children in order to free the children. There was a motto for a school years ago that I had an acquaintance who was the director there. So we give our children roots and we give our children wings. And their little logo was the dandelion. But that's the same idea that Fleck is getting at here. From the time children are born, they need to be nurtured and developed and cultivated so that they are emancipated once they become adults. If you're in your 50s and still living with your mommy or your daddy, sometimes there's good reason for that. But the emancipation function has not been accomplished within the family. And so freeing the children, helping them adjust to separations is a very important part. And then finally, the families fulfill or need to fulfill what's called the recuperative function. And if you think about it, it's probably home that you go to in order to kick back and be your worst self. Okay, there needs to be some place in this world that people love the real you, the worst you, whatever. And when the stresses, we do all that impression management stuff in the workplace to a large extent at the university, and this is your workplace part of the time, and you're managing impressions and you're being on good behavior most of the time at least, but we generally don't say everything we're thinking to the people around us in this room. But it's when we go home that we can do, remember message logic, the expressive dumps, where we can have the emotional dumps and dump it all out and so forth. But anyway, the worst you can come out at home, and it's certainly where you go to kick off your shoes, maybe shed some of your clothes, do whatever it is you need to do in order to recuperate. So families are very important to us for a variety of communication function related reasons. Okay, regress and recuperate, same sort of thing. Okay, Carl Rogers has what's called client-centered approach, and we just kind of touch on that to pick up the part that is most applicable in our interpersonal relationships. But he said that people need threat-free environments or what he called unconditional positive regard. And this ties into the I'm okay, you're okay material that we'll see and recap shortly as well. But anyway, we've talked about that before, so we won't get hung up there now. Okay, we also took a look at the work of Lang, who was our perspectives person, and told us that there are direct perspectives, meta-perspectives, meta-meta perspectives. And it could go on forever. But if I say, I like chocolate cake, that's a direct perspective. Or you're B, I'm A, you're B, for this example. You say, I hate fried potatoes. I've only known one person who ever said that. Yeah. But anyway, that's a direct perspective. But then it becomes a meta perspective if I say, I think you hate fried potatoes. Or you say, I think Dr. Hahn loves chocolate cake. Okay, that's an indirect perspective. It's A's opinion of B's view toward the attitude object X, etc. Okay, now I could go, you keep going back and forth. Meta-meta perspective, I think you think I like chocolate cake. I think you hate fried potatoes. And that may or may not be right. That's just the perspective. Okay? It's kind of like going into these elevators or getting in rooms where the mirrors reflect back and forth and back and forth, back and forth. I think you think, I think you think, I think you think such and such. Except when it gets that far down the line, it's kind of like, whoa, what did you say? So for purposes of example, we stop at the meta level. But every time you add an I think on there, you're adding a level of indirect perspective. But we talk in those terms, and we have those perspectives. Well, I think she thinks that he's going to do thus and so. I think she thinks that I think thus and so. And sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. But it's another interpersonal behavior that we engage in. Okay, very quickly, because you've got these in your book, we've talked about them before. Watzlawick, Bevan, and Jackson. A person cannot not communicate. Even if you're asleep, you're sending off nonverbal messages. Every message has a content and relationship aspect. If you say, shut the door, that's very different from shut the door. Or sit down. Sit down. See, the tone of voice, the nonverbal dimension of that defines the relationship. Do I have the authority to say to you, sit down? maybe in here, but most contexts, no. Do you have the authority to say to me, Dr. Hahn, sit down? You could try it. I don't know what would happen. See, but the way you say things as well as what you say reflects this content relationship. And of course, if you're in theater class, you can take the same sentence and say it 49 different ways, and the meaning will change every time you do that. Okay. The sequences, nag, withdraw, withdraw, nagging, you have to know who started it. You know, there are all these, it's kind of like a clip out of a movie. Unless you know how it fits in context, you can't be sure what it means. And so you have to know, was one person sitting there all introverted and withdrawn behind their newspaper drinking coffee, and the other one started nagging them, trying to find out what they wanted for supper? Or was the first person nagging, and so the second person, or first, whichever, the other person, picked up the newspaper, took their coffee, and just hid themselves behind that. And so until you know who started it, you know, you don't really know. But the important thing is that our communication interactions are sequenced and they're grouped or punctuated. And knowing where the punctuation goes helps a lot. Okay, this one, digitally and analogically, is simply saying we communicate verbally and non-verbally. We've worked that one to death in here already. And the relationships can be symmetrical or complementary. Dr. Williamson was just talking to you about that in the last lecture, too, so we won't go back over that. Okay, there are destructive communication patterns. There's our same Mark Knapp again. This is the guy over at the University of Texas. There are certain things we do that just aren't healthy for our communication relationships. One is aggressive communication, which is different from assertive. Assertive is being brave enough to speak up for yourself and so forth, but aggressive takes on that nasty, hateful, sharp edge to it, which is much less pleasant. Okay, he also recognizes that there are 5 stages in hassling. We may start with a little repartee, being cute with one another, and work our way up through cliches into name-calling, until finally we provoke the other person so much that there's a physiological outburst. Okay, physiological outburst may mean you get in a fist fight, somebody pulls out a gun, shoots the other person, one party, usually the female, bursts into tears. But whatever kind of outburst is, and if you have people that provoke you, hopefully not to guns, but to emotional outbursts, start working backwards and look at how you got to that point. What was the trigger? What was the provocation that pushed you over the edge? Particularly if it happens with the same person repeatedly. What does that person do that pushes you over the edge so that the next thing that happens is you're screaming at them? And if you work your way backwards, you may find out that it started clear back at some little cutesy repartee type exchange. Because usually people don't just walk in and start name-calling. Sometimes, especially kids on the block. But anyway, this is a fun way of looking at that. Not just fun, but a useful way of looking at how we get to those particular points. Okay, what's going on here? You seem to be locked up. The evasive strategies are next, if we can get to them. Naughty PowerPoint. Okay, the evasive strategies, and you may just have to refer to your book there. For some reason, this seems to have locked up for the first time, where we change the focus of responsibility, we change the direction of the conversation, we change the level of the conversation. Okay, sometimes, people are talking and we say, well, it's not my problem, it's not my fault, somebody else should have fixed it, they're in charge. Or we change the direction of the conversation. The child comes in and says, what's for supper, Mom? And Mom's disappointed with the way the room, the way the room's been kept, and so you say, we're not going to talk about supper, we're going to, we're fighting with the PowerPoint up here, folks. Anyway, go to your room, get your room cleaned up, we'll talk about supper later, okay? And so when that happens, the whole direction of the conversation has changed. Sometimes we change the level, sometimes we just have inconsistent messages. We get into other disconfirming patterns that involve things like, and I think Dr. Williamson talked with some about this, when we expect people to engage in mind reading, and the example I gave you about the restaurant, you should have known where I wanted to eat. Well, anytime you expect now when you can read the other person's mind, that's a good thing. Okay? And when you perceive what they need and you adapt to that, that's good. But when you expect that of the other person, then you're setting yourself up for trouble. Okay? Another disconfirming strategy or destructive communication pattern is hypercritical. You like people who gripe all the time? God, I can't believe you wore that outfit. Why did you put that tie with that shirt? Oh my God. You really expect me to go, why did you order that? That's the most expensive thing on the menu. Or, that's too cheap. Here we are in this restaurant and you order the cheapest thing on the menu, they're going to think we don't have any money. Just nag, critical, whatever it may be. Okay, we're going to go back over here and see if we can get this to come back up. Okay, sometimes we also get ourselves in false, untenable positions. Do you have any idea what that might mean? Did you ever get yourself into a position where you thought, I don't have any business being here doing this? Come on down. There we go. Okay. Got a little help up here on the side. Okay. If you are not a drinker, some of you are, some of you aren't, but if consuming, thanks Scott, if consuming alcohol is really not your thing and you go on a date with somebody who takes you to a party where they're really imbibing, or maybe they're doing drugs too, and I hope that's not you. It's like, oh gee, what am I doing here? Now, some public speakers find themselves in that situation. You agree to make a speech, and we'll get caught up. Okay. You agree to, glad you got to see my cute little puppy dog. Okay. He's in a false, untenable position with his glasses and his bow tie. That's not the real Dalmatian there. Okay. Some people feel that way when they agree to give a speech, and then they get in front of the audience and they're terrified. Okay. I gave a commencement address once in Houston. I won't name the school, might get back to it. Anyway, I was pretty uncomfortable that day because I was out of my element. As long as I'm in my classroom, I'm happy, I'm okay. But there's some people who don't want to give speeches anywhere. You agree to give that speech, and that's not the real you. Okay? So anyway, that's what false untenable position means. You've gotten yourself into a communication environment that is very uncomfortable for you. Okay, attributions and injunctions. Attributions tell us how to be. Injunctions tell us what to do. Attributions, how to be. Injunctions, what to do. Okay, you think of court injunction. When the court gives an injunction, it's usually to stop something, but sometimes it's to send people back to work. But when the court orders it, it better happen. Well, we find people in our lives who are the same way, who tell us what to do and how to be. Now, you be good today. Now, you be sweet. Now, and I mean, some of that's okay. But once we get to be adults, and we have other people who are bossing us around, telling us how we should be, how we should live our lives, who are high controlling people, that may be problematic. Okay, self-fulfilling prophecies. When false perceptions become reality and somebody's told you for 15, 18 years how dumb and stupid and ugly you are, and you eventually come to believe that. Now, it's nice when it works the other way. They've told you you're the smartest, most beautiful, most wonderful, most intelligent person. Then that kind of self-fulfilling prophecy is okay. But if you believe you're a dumb blonde, or if you believe you're a nerd, or whatever it might be, by whatever that definition means to you, then it becomes problematic. Now, this next part will pop on through because I know Dr. Williamson talked with you already about paradoxes as well. But that's when you get that contradictory behavior, or communication, not behavior. You get a contradictory communication, and you're already into it. You can't not read something that you already read. I think she gave you the example of the, I think it's the phone company that sends the statement that says this page is intentionally left blank, and the message is right there in the middle of the page. Okay, she talked with you a little bit too about double binds when we get people into that, but we'll kind of recap on that when you've got a persecutor and a victim. Okay, and this sometimes happens like when a child goes to school and the teacher says there will be no fighting in my classroom, and at home the parents say somebody hits you, you double up your fist and punch them back. I don't want any kid of mine coming home all banged up because some bully got the best of you. And if the teacher's not going to control their behavior, that person's behavior, then you defend yourself. Well, you get in that situation, we have lots of metaphors for it. A catch-22, I'm between the frying pan and the fire. It's a no-win situation. Okay? And it's even worse when the parents do it to a child. As adults, we can recognize that we've gotten into that dilemma. Well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm supposed to be two places at the same time. This administrator told me to be here. That administrator told me to be there. Now, as adults, we might just say, I'm going to put them together and let them choose where I should go. Conflicting meetings, whatever. But as a child, you usually don't have the resources to deal with that sort of thing. And so Bateson discovered that if this happens long enough, persistently enough, you can actually produce schizophrenic people in the situation. And that occurs because meaning is in the mind of the perceiver, and each one of us selects and organizes and interprets our own stimuli. And whether it's the child trying to sort out contradictory messages from two parents, or I put this German Shepherd up because it looks almost identical to ours, whether it's our shepherd trying to figure out what we're talking about. Now about and we've talked earlier in here about whether animals communicate and so forth, and most of what they engage in is assigned behavior. But in Sugar Dog's case, in her case, the word toy is, and it's probably the way we say toy. It may be the inflection rather than the coding, and we won't go back to all of that. But she selects and perceives and organizes that stimulus differently from other things, like I think I'll get the flea spray and give you a good shot. Oh, okay. You know what we're talking about. But when you look at her and say, where's your toy? Go get your toy. You'll get an expression much like the one that's on the screen. Because whether it's a bright dog or a dumb dog even, but whether it's an animal or whether it's a person, the meaning is in the mind of the perceiver. And the way we select and organize the stimuli is important and varies from person to person. Okay, very quickly we're going to go through some confirming patterns. These are the good things. Hopefully you do these well. But confirming communication patterns are the positive, supportive statements that we make to one another. They're descriptive rather than evaluative. And often it involves what's called I language rather than you language. Rather than saying, you make me so mad, to say, I have a problem when you leave your trash all over the table or you leave your clothes all over the floor. Anyway, learning to be descriptive rather than evaluative is much more confirming than making those judgmental kinds of statements. And what you're doing is describing the other person's behavior, how you feel about it, what the consequences of that are, and particularly how that's affecting you. Okay, we had Altman's social penetration theory. I won't go back through it. It has 4 stages, much like the 3 that we saw earlier and the 5 that we had from Knapp. Orientation, exploratory affective exchange, affective, where you're actually exchanging feelings, and then stable exchange. Okay, and the next one you have up in your book is social exchange theory, and we've already talked about that one, that people expect fair exchanges of their communication resources. Those exchanges have to be reciprocal. If I say hello, I expect you to say hello. The exchanges have to be either the same or they have to be equivalent. Okay, if 2 people are friends and one has a lot of money and the other doesn't have much money, then it may be that the one with less money, when they go to lunch, that person buys and they get quick food, a $5 meal. And when the person with money, when it's their turn to buy, they go to a better restaurant and that person spends $15, maybe $20, whatever is perceived as fair and reciprocal for the people in the situation. But the link needs to be clear. Sometimes you think you've paid back a favor and the other person doesn't think so, and so there's a little tiff going there. Not all resources are appropriate for exchange. Smiles, those are usually safe enough. Touch, depends on who the person is. Sex, really depends on who the person is. Money, may depend on the context. In some countries, you pay bribes, and that's expected. In other situations, bribes are flat out illegal. So anyway, that's how social exchange works. Okay, we can check the quality of relationships. Remember those from Berger. If you want to know, does this person love me? You think I want to know if I think he's going to propose or not. Well, you can ask, do you love me? But if you're not confident doing that, then sometimes you go to your best friend or someone else and say, do you think she really likes me? Do you think he loves me? And so you ask a third party. Of great interest is always the trial intimacy move. You move a little closer. Does the person stay there? Do they move a little closer? Do they move away? One tries to kiss the other. Is there reciprocal action, or does the person pull off? And I leave you to your imagination on the rest of that. Okay, taken for granted strategies. The better you know someone, the stronger the relationship is, then you can take it for granted. You don't have to make a date to go out anymore. You know that, your significant other will be there at 7 p.m. or whatever the usual time is. The faculty, they almost never check up on us to see if we're teaching our classes. It's taken for granted that we'll be where we're supposed to be. I don't call the cameraman or anybody around here to see if they're going to be here in the mornings. I take for granted that they will do what they've said they will do. They take for granted that I will be here. And so that's a mark of a quality relationship, when you can trust each other, take those things for granted. Endurance test, you're starting to push the limits. How long can you be late before the boss has had enough? It's similar to cost escalation. But how much will the other person endure of your nagging, of your lateness, of your blatant stupidity, of your incompetence, whatever the negative factor may be, before they say enough, we're ending this relationship. Jealousy test, you all know how to make your significant others jealous, but that's how much will they put up with? Will they get jealous? Okay, and if they don't get jealous, if they could care less what you do, that tells you one of the things about the relationship. Fidelity checks, that may be where you actually hire the private investigator to take the camera and go out and check. You think there's something going on, but you can't catch it. Okay, these strategies, if you were to regroup them, would fall into categories of passive, active, and interactive. Okay, sometimes you just watch and observe. Interesting. Other times they're active. You actually ask or create a test situation. And then finally, they're sometimes interactive. You actually engage in conversation with the other person, have a discussion about it. Okay, another short but useful theory is the rhetorical sensitivity theory of Rod Hart. And if you've read you should have all read the papers in the back of your workbooks by now, but the sample paper about rats can be rhetorical reflectors too used this theory as the springboard for that discussion. The rhetorical reflector, we'll look at it and then we'll go back to noble self. The rhetorical reflectors are the ones who adapt their messages to suit the orientation of the listeners, even if it means compromising their own values. So when you go back there and read about that rat that dressed up like a rabbit, there's a compromise of values there in order to accomplish goals. But in human perspective, the rhetorical reflectors are the people who will say anything to anybody because that's what they think the other person wants to hear. Now, the opposite extreme from that is the noble self, the people who have strong opinions and they hold to their values without concern for the impact on the other person. And if what I think offends you, then it's your problem. Too bad. If it steps on your toes, too bad. Okay, the happy balance in there is the rhetorically sensitive person. The people who stick to their own values and ethics, but recognize at the same time there's more than one way to create a message. And so they adapt their messages. Remember, Aristotle said rhetoric is the art of finding the available means of persuasion in any given case. The rhetorically sensitive people look at their options and then adapt without violating their ethics and values. They adapt to the people around them. So the way they explain something to their friends may be different from the way you explain it to your grandparents, may be different from the way you discuss it in the classroom. Okay, you have a lengthy discussion in your workbook about transactional analysis. This is a taxonomy rather than a theory because it's a list of related concepts, but it doesn't have the predictive value that some of the other theories have. Okay, and it looks first of all at ego states and says that we all function from one of three ego states. Our parent ego state may be positive or negative when we're being nurturing or critical. We have an adult ego state, which is our rational self, and our child ego state, which may be positive or negative. Our child ego state is uninhibited, free-flowing. The positive part is the part of you that's filled with wonder and joy and delight at life. The negative part of the child is the naughty temper tantrum throwing part of yourself. Okay, and we all have these elements in us. The critical parent would be the parent that's full of attributes and injunctions. The nurturing parent would be the loving, nurturing aspect of the self, the caregiving part of the parent. So positive or negative on the parent and the child, neutral on the adult. Okay, when they start talking to each other, when we talk to each other, we respond in one of three ego states. From those ego states, we respond to each other and have one of three types of transactions. They're either complementary, crossed, or ulterior. A complementary transaction is when you get an expected response. A cross transaction is when you get an unexpected response. And ulterior is when there's two levels, there's an ulterior message going on. Complementary might be if I stump my toe and I go, ow, I hurt my toe. Well, that's my child wanting somebody to take care of me, and I want your nurturing parent to say, oh, you poor thing, here, let me hold your books for a minute, or, do you need to sit down? Say something confirming and nurturing to me. But if you turn to me and say, stupid idiot, why don't you look where you're walking? See, that's an unexpected response, and that's not what I wanted to hear. Okay, and in our previous lecture, we've got more examples of this. Okay, so the complementary across. Ulterior might be something like if one says to the other, want to come up to the library this afternoon and watch rebroadcast of tapes, really get this stuff down, and the other person says, ooh, I'd love to come back to the library with you this afternoon. That's a good idea. And you could care less whether you watch reruns of these tapes or not. What you want to do is come to the library with the other person. In effect, your child ego states have made a date, while your adult ego states were talking to each other in a most logical manner about the importance of coming back and reviewing course materials before the next exam. Okay, fun theory, fun way to look at things. From this theory, we also get concepts like stamps and scripts and games that people play. And in our earlier lecture, we went through some of those games, interpersonal games, self-games that we engage in. But we collect stamps. The term came about in the olden days when we still had S&H green stamps around. A more current term, this class goes, what's an S&H green stamp? A more contemporary term for the same concept, though, is called gunny sacking, where you're annoyed at this person, but instead of telling her I'm annoyed, I pick up a rock and I put it in my gunny sack. Maybe you do this with your roommate. And then the next time they forget to take the trash out, you dump the whole sack of rocks all over their head. You idiot, you forgot again. And then here comes all the stuff about how you didn't clean up this and you didn't do that. And you were supposed to mail the letters. And you were supposed to get more stamps. You were supposed to stop at the grocery store. And here are 14 things I've got on my hit list that have me so mad at you that I've suddenly exploded. And from your point of view, it was like, all I did was forget to take the trash out and the can was only half full. So that's a very negative kind of thing. They also give, this is Thomas Harris and Eric Byrne, they also give us 4 life positions. Obviously where we want to be is, I'm okay, you're okay, which is the healthy. It doesn't say you're perfect and I'm perfect. It's kind of like Carl Rogers' unconditional positive regard. I'll view you as okay if you'll take me as okay. We all make mistakes, we all have glitches, etc., but that's okay. Let's be friends, let's cope, let's hang through this together and be okay. Now, all of the other 3 are unhealthy. I'm okay, you're not okay. Now, think about that for a minute. I'm okay, you're not okay. And if you say that to yourself 8 or 10 times and puff yourself up really full of ego, then think about what kind of mind state that person's going to have. Probably going to be pretty obnoxious. They'll step on other people. They'll use other people. At the extreme, they may take a gun and shoot them if they're annoyed with them, because I'm okay and you're not. I'm wonderful and you're trash. You can kind of project on that. We're getting a little short on time. But if we turn it around and I say, I'm not okay and you are okay. I'm not okay, but you are. Look at all that happened to me in the last week. This went wrong, and that went wrong, and this went wrong, and that went wrong, and God gave me the wrong body, and the beautician didn't fix my hair right, and my nails need doing, and this is wrong, and that's wrong, and the cat scratched me, and I bumped my toe, and I just turned into a real basket case. But look at you, you're young, and you have energy, and you have brains, and you have a better job, and you have a better car, and you have this. Well, you could get yourself suicidal. And at the extreme, people do commit suicide. Down at the other end of the continuum, they're just depressed. Okay, and then I'm not okay, you're not okay. We just need to all drink cyanide punch together, or push the button and blow up the world. And to save time, we won't explore that one all the way. But everybody finds themselves shifting from one position to another. We almost never stay totally okay all of the time. We all get a little depressed now and then. We all have up days where we're feeling really good. But what you want to try to do is get into that healthy life position and help the people around you get into that position, and then that's a good thing. Okay, very quickly, we talked about games, and strokes are the warm fuzzies, cold pricklies. I won't go back through games today. I want us to spend our last few minutes reviewing Schutz's theory of interpersonal needs. Remember, he said that everybody needs inclusion, control, and affection. And inclusion is the need to be with other people, to have a satisfactory relationship with them. A person who expresses inclusion might say, we're all going to lunch, you want to come too. The person who needs inclusion would be sitting in their office going, oh, gee, they're going to lunch again. Man, I hope they stop and invite me to go along too. Another person might be sitting there going, oh, gee, they're going to lunch. I hope they don't ask me because I don't want to have to turn them down again. And there's actually a questionnaire that Schutz developed, and you can go over to Counseling and Testing on a slow day and get them to give it to you. But it's a 54-item questionnaire where you can do one of these self-inventories and actually come up with scores between 0 and 9, 9 being high, 0, of course, being low, so that you have a score in these different categories. Now, the control factor refers to, and we all have some need here, varying levels. Some people need to be in charge, need to have control over other people, a lot of control. CEOs have lots of control and generally enjoy it. But some people don't like to be in charge. Some people want other folks to tell them what to do. So that's the need to be controlled. So if you express control at a high level, you like to be the president, you like to be the chairman, you like to be the leader of whatever it is, then you would be expressing control at a high level. If you could care less and it's fine with you if somebody else makes the decision, then you would have a low control factor. If you need somebody else to tell you what to do, then you need to be controlled. And that's a different thing. And some people go, God, I don't know what I should wear today. What do you think I should wear? Would you wear, we're going to a party. What are you going to wear? What do you think I should wear? Well, how should I do my hair? What kind of car should I buy? What do you think I should? There's those people who look for others to tell them what to do. Well, by this theory, they need to be controlled. The third category is affection, and that has to do with how much you express and need affection. Some people are so neurotic they can't get enough love. People can't meet their need for affection. But then at the other extreme, there are those untouching, cold, impersonal kinds of folks. And then, view these as a continuum. But do you give love? Are you a huggy, touchy, smiley, affirming kind of person? How much do you need that from other people for you to feel okay? And that's what that dimension of this is measuring. Now, we don't have time to go back through the whole thing today. Here's the reference to the questionnaire. And when you get all your scores, then you end up with what's called a social interaction index. And this is all in your workbook, so we're just reviewing through this today. But you can pause and give yourself some scores and assess those. And while it won't be as accurate as actually taking the questionnaire, giving yourself those scores and then estimating them for someone else who is important in your life is useful. And we did a profile and looked at what we can predict about the behavior of that person. And we looked at a second person then, and I know I'm going so fast you can't even read these. We've got about a minute left here. But we've been back over this, or we're going back over what we've done before. But anyway, you can characterize a person based on those scores. So whether you make up some scores and practice this on your own, or look at the two people that we've examined in the slideshow before, should these two people, A and B, get married or not? And we discussed the pros and cons of that. And then in your book, you have some profiles of different types of personalities in there, and we don't have time to go back over those today. I won't ask you test questions, the current class or the tape classes on these, but these are just kind of fun to look at. The rock, the ball of fire, and like I said, these are all summarized in your workbook. The neurotic with their high emotional needs. Another name for them is the emotional black hole. Those people just can't get enough. The affectionate homebody, the hollow man, the patsy. All of these are types of extreme profiles which hopefully we don't have to deal with. Okay. But they can all be guides to us. And then we looked last at the 3 deceit strategies of Bueller and Burgoon. You can go back and review those. Verbal language and some of the effects of nonverbal language on those, how we adapt and mask and give out nonverbal cues. Okay. But understanding interpersonal communication is one of the most important things that you will do this semester. We spend more time on this unit than any other because it has such implications throughout your life.